Very good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. We're broadcasting live from the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzang, and of course, your early morning, what do you call it now? Breakfast start?
Perfect day starter.
Okay. You know, it's not my lines. I can't remember it. With the one and only Bukola.
Yes, indeed. Good morning. Monday opens with fresh opportunities and indeed a fresher resolve on our part to make it bright, to make it wonderful for you and make it worthwhile for you as you also on your own part attack your opportunities, to make and improve yourselves. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. We're live from you, for you, here in the nation's commercial capital and our global headquarters. I am Bukola Koka. How's the weekend?
Yeah, it was
Jeffrey?
Great. Well, not as much as sleep as I wanted to see. There are different sides to life. There's the work life, there's the home life, there's all kinds of life. But anyway, I tried to catch as much sleep as I could, but, you have to take other responsibilities. So also, as I always say, when you can, sleep as much as you can. I did sleep the little I can, and then do what I could do within the times I have. Also following what was going on in the country. Once a journalist and a reporter and a newsman, you always are a newsman because you keep following the stories just to make sure that what we call working familiarity is the least you can have, even if you don't have expert knowledge. So a lot has happened in our country. But we must say today is Children's Day, so happy International Children's Day to all our lovely children. And before we go to that, I'm sure you're wondering, we're not complete right here. Yeah, Kade is unavoidably absent. He's going to be returning to the show tomorrow, bright and early. So we're going to miss him on the show. So happy Children's Day to, him. I should say to him too. All of us are happy.
To all of us, actually. There's that thing about children that fills our hearts, that childlikeness that fills our hearts with joy and gratitude for the miracle of having them in the first place, and sometimes we wish that that childlikeness never leaves, because of the that special thing, that they bring to our hearts. And so we wish them a very, very happy Children's Day. And we'll let them know that we're loved. Yes, this is an opportunity, for you to let the children know that they are loved. Don't wait for them to do something special, for them to excel at their examinations, get promoted to the next class before you show them appreciation. Just because we're giving they're giving to us as a gift in the first place is the reason that we should ensure that they know that they are loved. So we love you, children, all over Nigeria. You're special, and indeed, we'll continue to work hard to make sure that your dreams come true. We love you. Happy Children's Day.
Well, the future is yours. You can begin to prepare it from now. So happy Children's Day to all of those lovely children. I was in church yesterday, and I saw these different categories of children performing. It was so beautiful to see. Then the teenagers, then those between 7 to 14 or so, 12, and then the very wonderful ones, the toddlers, those ones that need a lot of monitoring and control. And, oh boy, it was so beautiful to watch them. Maybe they're like 1, maybe 2 or 3. They're really, really young. So happy Children's Day to every child out there. Know that the world is yours. Be confident. Don't let nobody beat you down, whether you're male or female. Know that you're good enough. You're worthy. You can do all you put your mind to do. Let nobody tell you otherwise. The country is yours to take, Begin from now. As much as those of you can understand what we're saying at this level, we're hopeful that when it's time for you to, when you're our age, you're not going to be saying the good old days. You're going to say, days are better. Gen Alpha, they call you guys. I don't know what's going to be the next generation.
Gen Pre-Alpha.
I don't know. So happy Children's Day. But beyond that, it was a sad tale yesterday or so when we heard the news that some of the students that were kidnapped from Confluence University in Kogi State lost their lives. They were killed by the bandit, and it is just a very sad and sorry development. This is just another, painful experience when it comes to our security situation in the country. There were negotiations going on. Some have been released. A couple of them, I think, are still in captivity. We do not know why they died or they were killed by the bandits. But our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts with the families of those affected, because really, what can you say to these parents who send their kids to get the best of education at the tertiary level, hopeful that someday they will leave that school, become something for themselves and their community and the country, and be helpful to the family as well. And now, for no reason, you know, for no fault of theirs, I should say, they are killed just like this in the hands of bandits. This should never happen. These are the kinds of headlines that put us in bad light, and this should be stopped.
And you know, Jeffrey, when I reflected on that news yesterday, I couldn't take it away. I couldn't look at it independent of Children's Day. And the reason is simple, because, you know, there are another category of children. Parents sent those kids to school to learn, to get an education. And the fact that they were killed, whether we like it or not, is a failure on the part of government, is a failure of leadership. You know, last week we had one of our guests, you know, demonstrate, albeit satirically, that line from the time that they were children. You know, they are leaders of tomorrow, and they're gradually growing old, and their voices are cracking and changing, and they still do not see that opportunity of leadership. They still are disconnected from the lack of vision on the part of leadership that is supposed to be carrying them along and helping them to have a sense of belonging about being indeed leaders of tomorrow. Those kids that were killed, you know, is evidence of that failure of leadership, that failure of vision, connecting them to their own position as leaders of tomorrow. Their dreams have been slaughtered on the altar of failure of security of lives and property. And one of the you know, lines from our promo by a child in recent times is saying that we want more security around schools. So we hope that the federal and state governments will reflect on that very pressing need, that there should be more security, particularly in universities. We remember the attack on the university in Taraba State. Thankfully, the students there, I don't think they recorded you know, any death, but there was some kidnapping and they were released later on. But fortunately, we have lost these two students from the Kogi State Conference University in Kogi State. It tells you, you know, the type of mindset of these bandits. It tells you that they don't reason as you and I do reason, because negotiations were on, you know, to get the kids. I insist that they're kids, even though they may be some level of adults. How old are they? 20, 22? But they were sent there by their parents. So negotiations were on, but still they were ruthlessly murdered by the bandits. We hope that, you know, from this point, there will be more reflection about the need to ensure security in all our schools, because, you know, that level of our responsibility is for the government to secure lives and property. That's the first responsibility of government. Jeffrey?
It is absolutely, you just captured it well enough, because there's nothing more to be said. When it comes to people dying, really, what do you say? Because what do you tell the parents? That's my worry. How do you explain that to the parents? It's the most difficult part for me, that the child went to school and it's not back, not because there's, you know, whatever. They were killed by bandits. What business do they have with bandits? So as you say, it's a failure of government. And this has to do federal, state, local. When we say government, because most times we go to federal government first. We know that the federal government controls the security apparatus. However, all of us have a responsibility. So let's do the best we can. Bandits, terrorists, kidnappers, all of these guys, they are our enemies. Let's be clear on that. They are enemies and should be treated as such. That's the truth. We can't continue to lose innocent lives. But as we say, our hearts and our thoughts and even our prayers are with the families of those students who lost their lives. And then away from that, we also saw that although it's been resolved now, there was a derailment along Jere area when you're coming to, the train was coming to Abuja from Kaduna. We understand the derailment happened, but fortunately, so that's the train. I think there's a point around Jere where that incident happened. So you can see that misalignment. You can see that misalignment, but fortunately for all of us, no casualty was recorded. Passengers were stranded for a bit, for some time. We don't know. The details will be out exactly. So you can see continuation of train services has resumed in that area. But we're grateful that the derailment did not cause any serious human casualty at the end of the day.
And indeed, we should be grateful also that the lives of those on board the train at the time are safe. You know, they've arrived their destination safely, I believe. And then you also must reflect upon the possible reason why there was a derailment in the first place. You know, time and again, we've had news of vandalism, of the train tracks, you know, of how, you know, vandals just go there and remove those iron bars for sale. What are the efforts to ensure that those tracks, because they are our collective commonwealth, what are the efforts government is putting in place to ensure that those tracks are safe and secure for continuous travel, you know, and for continuous business, because this is government property. This, beyond being government property, is our collective commonwealth. If it stops working, everyone will suffer for it. We should do better as citizens, even as we continue to challenge government to also do better by the citizens.
So that's exactly what happened yesterday. The investigation is still on, but the good news is that authorities have said that normal services within that corridor continues. Today, I think just yesterday, it continues exactly the time. Unfortunately, it didn't cross the entire stretch of the rail line. Well, what do we have for you today? Let's get straight to business. The Federal Ministry of Petroleum is the only ministry that has 3 ministers at its helm, led by the president himself. However, it's being challenged by productivity on one hand and sabotage on the other. Nigeria has not been able to meet both its OPEC quota and projected production capacity, convoluted by the lack of clarity of the petroleum industry implementation. That's the Petroleum Industry Act. Let's talk about how the sector has fared in the last 1 year under President Bola Tinubu.
And from matters of oil and gas, we move into history, and with a bit of especially contemporary events. It's the reinstatement of Emir Muhammadu Sanusi II and removal of Aminu Ado Bayero, which have left both royals laying claim to the highest traditional stool in the Kano Emirate. That decision by the State Assembly and ratified by the governor and kingmakers have polarized the city. How can peace be restored to the commercial city in the north? We try to explore the delicate balance on a very sensitive subject. Promises to be interesting, right?
Yeah, interesting. Jeffrey. We've seen that power play. This is just reminiscent of what happened during the time of Abubakar Rimi in '83, where the Emirate was also split into 5 Emirates, but the Emir then was not deposed. That was the difference. That's Ado Bayero, the one, I think the father of Aminu.
But there was a balkanization of the Emirate system.
Some call it balkanization, some call it division, depends on who you're talking to at the end of the day. But this seemed to be an unending because Muhammadu Sanusi II is at the main palace while Aminu Ado Bayero is in the other smaller palace in Nasarawa. So we're going to explore that subject. But first, we'll take a break and we'll bring you your top stories. When we come back, we'll start the conversation. But don't forget that WhatsApp is open for you to send your messages and your videos. You can also post on X. Have that conversation with us. We call it a community show. So we'll take this quick break. When we come back, we'll bring you your top stories. Join us again. Top on the brief this morning is the president's defense of the construction of the 700-kilometer Lagos-Calabar coastal road, insisting that the benefit outweighs the risk. President Bola Tinubu, buttressing his points, believes the ambitious road will open up a vista of economic possibilities, attract investment, and connect communities along its path, a position he held during the flag off of that particular road, among others, in Lagos. The nation's leader says it's a bragging day for him and promises the road will be completed. And this comes amid criticism of how the 700-kilometer road, within an estimated cost of about 15 trillion naira, has affected businesses and ancestral homes.
To me, today is my day to brag. like it or not, you are here. And the hope is here. So, what else? If you have hope, you have Rahman, you have Asiwaju, and you have Dave. The deal is done. The dream is realizable. Set on a journey, determined to build a nation of prosperity. Embark on bold endeavor so that your country can be successful. Generations yet unborn can have a good landmark.
We're not done with that story. Earlier, the reconstructed Apapa Waronshoki or Jata Expressway was inaugurated following the completion of the project that started 6 years ago. The road is a public-private partnership undertaken by the Dangote Group. The president, represented by the president of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, commended the quality of work on the road and the renovated third mainland bridge. A similar sentiment was shared by the chairman of Dangote Group, Mr. Aliko Dangote, and the Minister of Works, Dr. Engineer Dave Umahi, who were part of the dignitaries at that particular event. Now, the leadership of Kano Emirate has continued to polarize the ancient city's polity as another protest erupted, calling for the removal of Emir Mohammed Sanusi II. The protesters are demanding the reinstatement of Aminu Ado Bayero as the Emir of Kano following his removal after the State Assembly passed a law abolishing 4 new emirates created by the previous administration, a decision assented to by the governor, leading to the reinstatement of Mohammed Sanusi II. They are protesting on the State Road close to the Nasarawa residence of the Emir, where Aminu Bayero is residing at the moment. Opinions have been divided in the city for and against the decision of the state government since the development as both monarchs lay claim to the throne.
We are all here, as you can see, Kano State people are gathered out to show their, let me call it, to show their unhappiness over what state government have done. No, as generally, Kano State people needs the Pipe Emirate to be stands as Emirate.
That I want justice to be happening in Kano State, in the Emirate Council, because God knows that our Emir, Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero, it doesn't make any problem for him. You cannot create there's a problem for him. The Kano State governor cannot say that there's one problem that created since Aminu was in Kano Emirate Council. We are having a peaceful staying in Kano.
Our advice is strongly on the dethroned Emir Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero to quickly vacate Kano State. Even if he's going to claim his right, he should leave Kano, and then whatever may come later, you take it in good faith. But he should accept this is from God and leave Kano State.
Meanwhile, the National Security Advisor, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, is threatening to sue the Deputy Governor of Kano State, Mr. Aminu Gwazo, for defamation. The Deputy Governor had alleged that the NSA facilitated the return of the dethroned Emir, Aminu Ado Bayero, by providing him with 2 private jets. Although Mr. Ribadu has since denied the allegation, he is threatening to sue the Deputy Governor if he fails to retract the claim. In a letter to the Deputy Governor from Aliyu and Musa Chambers Council to Mr. Ribadu, the NSA demanded a public apology from the Deputy Governor, which must be tendered within 24 hours, which must be in 5 national dailies and online. We understand that the Deputy Governor has actually tendered that apology, but we'll bring that development in our subsequent bulletin. In a rather sad development this time, bandits have killed 2 of the kidnapped students of Confluence University of Science and Technology of Sahara in Kogi State. The latest report was confirmed by the Kogi State Police Command. They recall that the armed men suspected to be bandits and on May the 9th attacked the school, shooting sporadically while the students were studying in their classes ahead of their examinations, abducting a number of them, but some were later released. In the meantime, the school management has declared 3 days of mourning as various groups and authorities continue to condemn the heinous act. Our thoughts and our prayers are indeed with that family. Let's move on now. The federal government has sued the governors of the 36 states of the Federation at the Supreme Court over alleged misconduct in the administration of local government areas. The suit filed by the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Mr. Lateef Agbaje, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is seeking full autonomy for all local government areas in the country. In the suit, the federal government specifically prayed the court to issue an order prohibiting state governors from embarking on what they call unilateral, arbitrary, and unlawful dissolution of democratically elected local government leaders. So in the states, through their respective attorneys general, the AG prayed the court for an order to allow direct payment to the local government from the Federation account in line with the provisions of the Constitution as against the alleged unlawful joint accounts created by the governors. Let's also tell you that the Abuja-bound train derailed halfway to its destination around Jere at about 8 a.m. early on Sunday, although no casualties were recorded. A visit to the scene shows that the Nigerian Safety Investigation Bureau and the management of the Nigerian Railway Corporation are conducting investigations to ascertain the cause of the incident. Meanwhile, the passenger train services between Kaduna, Idu, Abuja continues despite the derailment of the two-coach at the Jere terminal station, with the train supervisors on standby to see for a safe passage. It's time for business. The price of fresh tomatoes in markets in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos, has risen by over 100% in the month of May. Traders attribute the rise to regular seasonal fluctuations in the quantity of tomatoes produced, as they claim that the harvest period for the current species of tomatoes being sold is almost over with the coming in of the wet season across the country. According to reports, a basket of premium quality fresh tomatoes, which sold for between 50 and 80,000 naira in April, now sells for as much as 140 and 50,000 naira and 150,000 naira, a spike that is further deepening the holes in consumers' pockets. On the international scene, the trail of destruction by tornado in the United States has left at least 13 persons dead in 3 states. 4 persons were killed in Arkansas, 2 in Oklahoma, and 7 in Texas, leaving several persons injured and over 500,000 across states without electricity. According to the state officials, the death toll includes children and is expected to rise in the coming days. According to the National Weather Service, the storm had begun to move east, which is expected to come with severe wind and hail along its path. Edo Queens have emerged champions of this season's Nigeria Women Football League for the first time in their history. Edo Queens played out a 1-1 draw with former champions Bayelsa Queens in the final game of the 16th championship playoff held at the Samson Siasia Stadium in Yenagoa. The Benin City outfit finished top of the group with 10 points, while Rivers Angels, who also drew 1-1 with Heartland Queens, came second with 9 points, same as Bayelsa Queens, but with superior goals scored. The Queens will represent Nigeria in the West African Football Union Championships, which serves as qualifiers for the Women's Champions League later this year. Well, it was a big one for the people that are now in the top flight. We're talking about Leicester City, Ipswich, as well as Southampton. It was a big day, a comeback for Southampton, especially who are back to top flight football in the English Premier League after beating Leeds United 1-0 at Wembley. A first half goal by Adam Armstrong made all the difference to confirm a return to the EPL. The last time they were relegated from the EPL in 2005, it took them 7 years to return. But under the new coach, Russell Martins, it was a job properly done and efficiently executed. So congratulations to all of them, our very own Ndidi, and of course, here in Nigeria, back on top flight. I'm talking about Leicester City, finishing with almost 100 points, followed by Ipswich, and then, of course, Southampton, as we just rolled out. But those are the stories we've been tracking say in the last 24 hours, which will shape part of our conversation for the show and the rest of the day. Bukola now joins me as we explore what you've been saying. As always, thank you, Bukola.
Yes,
as
indeed,
always.
Jeffrey. Well done. Out of all of the stories that you have reviewed in the top stories, two get my attention, and for good reason, because they affect the people more than any other politics or any other statement coming from government as far as political happenings are concerned. And what are those two stories? The one about a basket of tomatoes now going for between 100 and 140,000 naira. It reminds me of our conversation with African Farmer just a few months ago, during which he warned that you may be complaining about the high cost of foodstuff now, but it's definitely going to, increase as the months go by, particularly because of the change in the farming season. And like a prophet, well, I don't want to call him a prophet of doom, but he was speaking of experience. It has come to pass. And the second is the commencement of payment of 70,000 naira by the Edo State government. And he tells us what is possible as far as negotiations of minimum wage are concerned. If Edo State can pay, definitely the federal government can do more than 54,000 naira.
Exactly. By the way, I saw African Farmer yesterday, and I forgot this part. I would have raised that conversation with him. But what are you saying on X? Let's get straight to it. Suspense as Sanusi Bayero lay claim to Kano throne. Tessie Aid says Sanusi and Bayero, their Royal Highnesses laying claim to Kano throne is appalling, and it's a show of shame towards the northern culture. In his words, kingship and heritage which should not be held relating to one of the highest thrones of monarchs in Nigeria. And
Jai Oba follows through with just 2 lines, but he says, I believe 2 kings cannot rule Kano, and one must surely step down. Really? Well, this is the first of its kind anyway, so we'll find out how things play out in the coming days.
Amole Akin 1 says, political issues, I believe governors are not supposed to have to remove power, remove power over a first-class king. That is the genesis of all these issues and could result to a dramatic community war. This is speaking about political interference in traditional affairs.
Yes, and this next one is from Toba Shagari, who says, for having 2 emirs on the same throne has already desecrated the sanctity of Emirates' traditional rulership. The tradition was the deposed emir was not seen in the state, as that would entail having 2 emirs in the state. But politics has desecrated the rich Emirates history. And we saw during the time that Emir Sanusi was deposed 4 years ago, he left the state, and indeed he began a life apart from Kano politics. I believe this is what is being referred to. But this is a departure, and we cannot view those issues independent of happenings even prior to Emir Sanusi's enthronement as Emir, in 2014.
Well, this is as old as 40 years ago. Abubakar Karimi did the same thing, but this time an emir was not deposed. It was just the division of the Emirates. But let's hope there will be peace in Kano, because protests erupting across Garaya and other parts of the other Emirates that were dissolved. Let's talk about the Minister of Power announcing that for the first time first time in how many years? First time in 3 years. We have reached an impressive output in terms of our generation to 5,000 megawatts this month. Chela says, your handle is Nuela Lucci. Show evidence, little rain, the power goes off. That's what you are saying. Bukola?
And the next one is by, I believe... Onodu Igbo. He says 5,000 megawatts is impressive for a nation of over 200 million people. No power supply in my area. Wednesday, Thursday, today, Saturday, there hasn't been any power supply, I believe, since morning. With your impressive 5,000 megawatts.
Well, what I'm happy about is that the government is feeling the pressure from the people. Every minister who is not working knows that by May 29, we don't know what may happen to you. So everybody has to start with a good record. So impressive output, but people are saying they don't have power. So you may have to reconcile that. Aneko Ejike says, what is impressive about 5,000 megawatts? We should be talking about 50,000 of electricity in 2024. Stop glamorizing failure. What is the use of coal deposit gas? Niger, our northern neighbors, has uranium. Why can't we have clean nuclear energy?
What happened to the Mambila hydropower project?
That's a conversation for a long day.
We should ask these questions. This next one is from Patriot Olayinka, who says, where is the 5,000 megawatts? Mr. Minister, those on band A, I believe he's trying to say, are complaining. Same with those in B to C. Now the complaints are coming from across board, regardless of the band of electricity supply that you're on. Anyway, he concludes by saying that all of us have been downgraded to band F. Mr. Minister, where is the 5,000 megawatts?
Oh boy! So let's move on now to something away from electricity to the Ministry of Interior, where home delivery of passports set to begin next month. You know, that minister Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo did quite an impressive things earlier, but now he's been a bit silent. But I'm happy he's talking again, and he's saying that aspiration to have your passport delivered to you at home next month. When is next month? Just a few days from now, about 5 days or 4 days.
Or less.
All right,
about 4
okay.
days, yeah.
Chris Ross says, commendable. There's a lot of improvement in this area. I applied online for a passport for a friend last month, and barely 2 weeks he has a day to come capture. He testified there was hardly any hustle. Big ups to those rejigging the system.
And Felix also says, we're finally getting things right in this country. Thumbs up to the Minister of Interior.
Exactly. So when they are doing well, let's applaud them. This is a great development, we must say. Nanya Chris, your handle is ifunanya_XT. I beg, Minister, don't overdo. Allow us to continue coming for collection. Oh boy.
He doesn't want his passport lost in transit, right?
For collection in person, divert our energy to making the processes swift and less cumbersome. Come on. Well, I don't know. But if it's possible to use technology to reduce or de-risk mobility, I think it's important that you can stay at home and process all of this.
And still stay at home and receive your passport.
Exactly, come on.
Well, if our mailing system can be guaranteed, then it's
something if our mailing system can be guaranteed,
then it's something to cheer and indeed look forward to, as a revamping of the whole public service system in the country. All
right, so those are the ones we've been able to, read out for you that you've been talking about on X. Please continue to talk to us. We'll amplify your voice right here. We'll go now for our very first conversation. We're reviewing the presidency or the leadership of President Bola Tinubu in the last 1 year. And today we're talking about the oil and gas sector. Join us again.
Welcome back. And as we move on in our conversation today, we start by reviewing the strides of the administration in the oil and gas sector in the last 1 year. An important subject to have, and as Jeffrey said earlier on, it's a sector that has 3 ministers, the president himself, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, being the minister of oil and gas. And of course, we have minister of oil, petroleum, and minister of oil, gas. And there's been a number of strides in that sector in the last 1 year, and even more if you consider, the groundbreaking oil theft that was discovered, by the private security firm employed by government. And of course, there has been very little accountability in that area in the last 1 year plus, especially since the coming in of the new administration. So, but what are some of the achievements as against what was promised, particularly in the manifesto of then a candidate of the APC, as against what is happening now? Joining us to have this all-important conversation on the program this morning, we have 2 gentlemen, and let's welcome Mr. Olabode Showunmi to the program. We have 3 of them, as a matter of fact. Mr. Olabode Showunmi is the chairman, New Energies and Hydrogen Study Group of NGA, and he's also a member group of experts on gas, UNECE. He's also the CEO, Captree Limited. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Olabode Showunmi. Very quickly, because we have a 3-man panel this morning, let me also introduce former President, Trade Union Congress, Mr. Peter Esele, and he's also the former President, Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasen. You're welcome, Mr. Esele. And lastly, on this panel, we have Mr. Billy Gillis-Harry, National President, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria, Petroleum. Good morning and welcome, gentlemen. Let me just confirm that you can all hear me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you clearly.
Good morning. Loud and clear from here as well.
Okay. It's a good thing that you can all hear me. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Esele. Let's start with a look at the manifesto. When I took a second look at it yesterday, what was visibly absent on the promised deliverables was the diligence to ensure that the refineries are delivered, i.e. Port Harcourt Refinery, Kaduna Refinery, Warri Refinery. I doubt if I saw that in the manifesto. Do you think it was deliberate because of the trajectory of, how the refineries have performed in the last couple of decades? Mr. Sele, I'd like you to take that first.
Well, good morning. And I think that may not be deliberate, because if you look at his plan is omnibus, because he's talking about having the right technology to make sure that that critical sector works for Nigerians. So when you have that in your manifesto, what that invariably means is that they are all encompassed, and they are all a plan that is to take care of the entire value chain. So, but our concern here will be, when will that refinery come on stream? Well, hopefully the GMG of NNPC, they have spoken about refinery, Port Harcourt especially, coming on stream. Maybe the second quarter. We are about coming to the end of the second quarter. But my main aspect is that don't also forget that the federal government has about 20% of the Dangote refinery, too, invested about 20% of Dangote refinery. So hopefully with Dangote refinery ensuring that by June, that was what Alhaji Dangote said himself, that hopefully by June, there will be no longer be any importation of petroleum products, which will be very good for the country and also help us put less pressure on FX.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Peter Esele. I'll come to you now, Mr. Gillis-Harry. Mr. Esele says that, what we should be looking at is something more holistic beyond the delivery of the refineries. But because of how critical, the delivery of the refineries are to the supply chain of the petroleum industry in the first place, don't you think it should have been prioritized in the manifesto? Mr. Harry, that's for you.
Good morning, Nigerians, and thank you for having me here. I will not agree any less with Mr. Peter Esele, but the fact that the refineries should be prioritized. It shouldn't even be a conversation. It should be top on the agenda of Mr. President. The agenda is renewed hope, and the hope that we're expecting to see in this sector will be exactly what can fast-track every possible development. And the Petron, for example, has been calling for an emergency declaration and the repair and delivery of all the refineries. And we've been in the forefront of ensuring that we follow up with all the activities. So it would have been such a very good taste to see those refineries working today. We know that most of them are in advanced stage, like Port Harcourt and Warri. Dangote is a private refinery with 20% equity for Nigeria. I think that the refinery should have been top priority, and I still will call, on Mr. President and his team to see how we can fast-track the delivery of the refineries to start producing in country. And that will go a long way to help our country, not just only in saving effects, but also making sure that our economy grows. Because most of the things we do in Nigeria here, being that we are lacking sufficient electricity power, is premised on fossil fuel generation of power. So refineries should be very important. I encourage so too.
And Mr. Shomi, I wonder if you have any other views contrary to what has been offered by Mr. Esele and Mr. Harry as they have spoken to the issue. Particularly, I'm asking, in addition to that, but relatedly, that is it, an approach of being non-committal to the delivery of the refineries that makes it, a visibly absent content on the manifesto?
Well, that question will be going into what they call it, a clairvoyance. I mean, trying to read people's mind. But if I'm to read precisely the whole energy policy, you will realize that globally we are in what we call energy transition, which is basically a system where they're trying to reduce fossil fuels. And Nigeria has dedicated this decade to be the decade of gas. And equally importantly, you will have seen that this administration has put a lot of emphasis on gas. I mean, it was in the news, reported even by channels, that the president refused to approve cars that are running on fossils at the moment, insisting that they will use gas. I'm not able to actually speak to the mind of the president. I'm not a politician in that sense, to be able to look at the political intent of the president. But I can't speak to the facts of the matter. And yes, the refineries are not they are not moving, and they should be. They should be operating and running now. That is a responsibility for the NNPC via the support of the downstream regulator. But what we can see and what we have seen is the fact that there's a lot of emphasis placed on cars to be using gas, and there's a lot of efforts being made by even the regulator themselves to ensure that every filling station at the moment is using gas. So there are some things that are, I mean, when you talk about plans for future, there's strategy and there's tactics. You can have plans as a strategy, but tactics are usually things that change from day to day. So maybe the tactics of the overall strategy is to get on the road, see what is working and what is not working, and then adapt to it. So from my own perspective, I can see very clearly they're going towards gas. Is that enough? That's a different case. Should the refineries be working? That's an absolute yes. Does the government need to put in more effort? That's definitely. And the people who are responsible for it needs to also buckle their shoes.
All right, let me come to a very important issue, which has to do with our productivity. And when I look at the manifesto, gentlemen, I would like you all to speak to this particular issue, maybe in a particular sequence. It's the fact that of all the promises that were made, this seemed to be like one of the set of promises where the government had a goal and how to achieve that goal. You could see them write goal and solution. So let's go to one of which is increased domestic production. They say they will increase crude oil production by 2.6 million barrels per day by 2027, and they are getting to 4 million barrels per day by 2030. and their way is to increase domestic crude oil production. We must increase greater success in determining crude oil theft and preventing vandalism of our pipelines. But as we speak, we've not been able to meet our per quarter. In fact, in January, I think we did 1.2, we did 1.3 in February. Around March or April, we did about 1.4. We've been fluctuating, and that is because of the condensate element. So my question to you, Mr. Isele, looking at some of these promises, because we can't hold them beyond what they promise, how possible is it for the government to really meet its target in terms of production capacity, given the challenges we face, realistically, from an expert point of view?
Full rather than half empty, because you see there is a progress. There was a time in this country we were doing 900,000 barrels a day. What we have now, we have moved from they've moved from 900 to 1.2 to about 1.4. So if you add the condensate element, they are doing at about 1.6 if you add the condensate element. So the projection by the NNPC is that before the end of the year, they are looking at doing 1.7. Now, if you also look at the other aspect of how do you increase production? First of all, you have to have the enabling environment, and then you have to have the issue of security, and then you also have to stop the pipeline vandalization. So what you have at the moment is that, yes, there's a reduction in that, but what I expect the government to do is to go ahead and make sure that those big fishes or big fish that are responsible for bunkering, that they are also brought to book. Because if you don't apply appropriate stance or appropriate measure, you are going to have issues around that. So that's why I use the word, I would rather say the glass is half full rather than half empty. Yes, are they making progress? Yes, they are making progress. But is it slow? It's also quite slow. So what we expect government to do is to look at the area of security and create the enabling environment for business to thrive. One thing is very clear: if you expect people to increase production, you must give them that environment for them to do it. One of the biggest problems we have in that sector is policy flip-flop. By policy flip-flop is that you wake up one morning and the government tells you this is what we want to do, this is our plan for oil and gas, and in another 2 months, and then you have another policy. That too should not be a factor anymore. The government must say this is our goal, and this is what we are doing to achieve that. I'm also happy that you pointed out that this is one area in their manifesto where they had to set various goals for themselves. If you also look at the other aspect of gas, Africa actually has 620 trillion cubic feet of gas, where Nigeria contributes about 30% of that. So if you look at our gas reserve, what we have at the moment, we can, at the going rate at which we are doing, it can take us another 100 years to completely exhaust it. So first is allow investors to come in there, provide the necessary security, provide the right policy trust to enable investment, and then we will say, okay, we are gradually making progress. Not until we do this, we will still be moving, but it's going to be as if we are crawling.
Let me come to you, Mr. Showman. The reason I asked that question, of course, I think I'll listen to Mr. Patrick of Total Energies talking about the moving investments to, I think, Angola, so to the tune of $6 million or $6 billion. And one of the things he cited is safety and, of course, policy inconsistency, which is why I'm asking this question, that we need to get to a point of consistency in our production level, whether you see it or you don't see it happening. What do you see that is potentially hampering the ability to get to the level we want to get to, even if we're recording a progression? We're going to come to the NNPC part.
Okay, so first and fundamentally, oil, energy really, is international business. And globally, there are 3 areas that no government, and I repeat none, even the US with the FBI, CIA, and border guards have not been able to fully control. One is illegal diamonds. The second is illegal drugs. The third is illegal crude. Illegal crude is an international menace. So when the government actually promised to end crude oil theft, what they meant was to significantly reduce it to a part where it doesn't affect the economy. There are parts of the theft that are dependent on Nigerians. We need not kid ourselves. It is very much like slave trade. It was one of the IOC's president who said that crude oil theft in Nigeria is like organized crime. So in other words, there are part of the people on the ground. There are part of people who work in the offices. There are part of security services that are involved in this. These are not things that are going to change overnight. So when the government makes this promise, they are making the promise, or I believe that they are making the promise within certain parameters. But having said that, it is still the responsibility of government to ensure that security is there. But if we look at where we were, which was less than 1 million, and we are now to 1.4, 1.6 within a year, I think that can, within reasonable sense, qualify as some amount of progress. Whether that is where we should be is a different ballgame. Whether that is where they promised is difficult to say, because they promised as against 2027, not as against 1 year. So if this talk is about to analyze the progress that has been made, I think that's one area they can definitely get a thumbs up in terms of what is obvious, what the facts on the matter is. In terms of moving forward, in terms of security, in terms of NNPC, in terms of, this is a responsibility that is fully Nigerian. And if we want progress, we have to avoid what we call the Messiah complex. The Messiah complex is a situation where we think one person or a certain clique will solve the problem that is the responsibility of everybody. So until we begin to ask those who are on the ground in some places in the Delta, we should begin to ask those who are within the Navy and the security forces, until we begin to ask everybody questions. And people begin to be questioned, and like they did for Bobrisky when it came to defacing of the Naira, and some people go to jail. We are still going to be having this thing and having this conversation even in 10 years' time. So there must be some scapegoats. There must be questions to every fabric of society. And I believe very strongly that's where the progress lies.
Let me come to Mr. Gillis Harris. Maybe moving away, you can speak to this maybe later, maybe as you're responding to the question. One of the things they promise is to accelerate full implementation of the PIA and implement additional favorable policies. One of the things we have not seen is this full implementation, especially the basic ones like the NNPC being quoted on the exchange. So we see NNPC as a regulator, as a player, and all of these elements that sometimes is quite confusing. We know they posted good numbers, but compare those numbers to Aramco and the rest of them, we need a bit of more good corporate governance. So for you, why do you think that the government or the NNPC, in agreement with the government, if you allow me to say so, because we own the NNPC as a country, though it's now a limited liability company, why is it difficult to begin to implement some of those very basic policies in the act that will help us, have a better corporate outlook for us to attract the kind of investment we need, especially in gas and oil?
Well, I think that whatever it is that NNPC has achieved, compared to what I personally will expect an oil company, a national oil company of that magnitude should achieve, has not, it's really something that's needing to have a harder look and more work to be done. If we have absolute knowledge and transparent knowledge, of course, of what is going on in NNPC, then it will be possible to make some assertions and also to proffer some kind of solutions and advice. There is no reason why Nigeria should not be in the top, oil-producing countries, commercial exchange and investment, attraction of investment, inward investment. What is required is just do the right thing, put policies that are transparent. We know that oil is such a very difficult thing to insist on transparency, 100%, but at least we can aim up to 85 or 90% of what is done with our oil and gas. And that in itself would be a pointer to how we should go. Now we have policies that came in from the PIA. NNPC today is really expected to be a commercial company. But again, I say this, NNPC is still having the advantage of working with the tools and assets of our sovereign, nationality. So it's also very important that while they are a limited liability company, we should also see transparently what they are doing. The accounting, the process of, pursuing our crude oil production, the process of getting crude oil for domestic consumption, the process of ensuring, that our sales, if we may, is returned, periodically and transparently, so that Nigerians will know. It will be much better if we look at NNPC from that perspective. But to your earlier question about what we think should be done to increase productivity, Mr. Seller and Shobimi has already narrated what is there. But I think what I want to insist there is ensuring that there is absolute understanding and implementation of the host policy regime. That will go a long way to ensuring that every community becomes a policeman in their area to guarantee safety of investors, guarantee safety of workers and NNPC, of Shell, of any company that's engaged in our fossil fuel exploration campaigns. Once that relationship between the community and the corporate organizations of the oil and gas and also the government is put in absolute unity, we'll see progress. Because when we say we have targeted to bring production up to 2.2 million, and we have done just 1.6, and that 1.6 is flip-flopping, that calls for, it calls for question. We need to know what happened. So do we have a roadmap? Do we have milestones to achieve? And if we do have this milestone to achieve, how are we pursuing that? And I think these are things that Nigerians should all be responsible, because the president, as he is Minister of Petroleum, will obviously have little or no time for this sector. And the other two ministers of state, Minister of State for Petroleum and Minister of State for Gas, I believe should do as much as possible to create that environment where every Nigerian is part of the process to protect the infrastructure of our oil and gas reserves, production, distribution, and whatever it is.
All right, let's look at yet another component on the manifesto of the APC, speaking of what it promised, and this is about oil theft, to establish a special enforcement and monitoring unit whose sole mandate will be to protect the nation's pipelines with technological interventions. That was what was promised, to monitor the pipelines with technological interventions. But I'd like you gentlemen to also look at it against the backdrop of what is not contained specifically in that manifesto, which is consequence management for those who are pilfering the nation's resources in the form of economic sabotage that is stealing Nigeria's crude oil. Recall the major burst of pipelines that crude oil was being stolen from years, which we covered last year. Our correspondent accompanied the private security firm to the creeks. And also recall NATI's report, in which it said that the NNPC had an outstanding debt of 3.981 billion over recovery from Petroleum Support Fund scheme. So can we look at all of these independent, the promise of crude oil theft rather, independent of lack of consequence management, lack of prosecution of those who have been fingered to be involved in major crude oil theft? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Esele, on this one.
Yes, one of the things, I think I alluded to that earlier, one of the things that is a major bane is that there are no consequences. We are aware that I watched it on channels where somebody, a tanker was seized, and at the end of the day, someone went ahead and set it on fire. And I'm asking myself questions. First of all, you damage the environment. Secondly, we don't know those who are behind those tankers. Thirdly, if we decide to prosecute, that's one of the evidence. There is none. So what you have is that we have a whole chain. The chain is that you cannot steal a barrel of crude without having security agencies being part of it. What we are dealing with is a failure of our various institutions. It's not just the president. We expect the president to do X, Y, Z. But the fact is that if you have somebody in NNPC, you have somebody in the upstream regulatory agency that is not doing this job, you have somebody in Nigerian Navy that is not doing this job, you have somebody in Nigerian Army, because and somebody in DSS, because all of these agencies that I've just mentioned are part of those that will sign off on anything leaving this country. So if you have a cartel whereby we go as, there was a time where they were reporting as high as 400,000 barrels a day being stolen. And if you have that and nobody is being arrested, nobody is being prosecuted, what we are dealing with is that it becomes a national security threat. So just imagine somebody, a barrel of crude, let's say it's even $3, and somebody, a group, are going away with 400,000 barrels a day, and just multiply that by 400,000, you will find out that in the long run, those guys are going to be a threat to national security. So first is that we must have an appropriate consequence management, which means that those who are behind all of these, the various institutions that are failing to deliver on what they have agreed to do, are brought to book. Once you do that, then you are sending out the message that, hey, this will no longer be tolerated. And then what you have done, you will substantially reduce what is being stolen. We don't hear about crude oil theft in places like the UK. We don't hear about crude oil theft in Saudi Arabia. There are technology to make sure that from point A to point Z, the Saudi Arabian government, the Aramco, you are able to see your pipeline. I've heard NNPC is trying to create something like that. I also heard NNPC now have their own what are called war room, where they're able to view all of majority of that pipeline. But they need to make all of this public, because one of the things that technology does is that technology not only stop theft, but what technology also does, it also prevents it. Because once somebody is aware that somebody somewhere is seeing whatever you are doing, that goes a long way to reduce crude oil theft. But as it is, it's not something we expect the government to it's not like ordering for an a la carte or going to shopping mall to buy cosmetics. It's something that you must design, you must plan, it must be systemic, and it must be structural. Our biggest problem here is that we talk a lot. On paper, we have all the documentation to solve our problems, but we lack the discipline to follow through.
Let me come to you, Mr. Showme. Everything we are saying here, Mr. Showme, boils down to one thing. Nigerians want to have, let's say, access to good fuel and affordable fuel at the end of the day. So that's the premise on which we're going to judge, if you will, on this particular issue. So one of the big questions I have on my mind to ask you, Mr. Showme, especially is it a bottleneck when you have the president as the Minister of Petroleum? Look at all the potential we have. About 37 billion in our reserve in terms of oil, and about over 200 trillion cubic feet in terms of our gas reserve. But when you look at what the NNPC is posting, when they posted $2.6 billion, Aramco was posting about over 150 or 60 billion dollars. And even the NNPC posting, if you look at their operating margin, is way overboard comparatively to the likes of Aramco. So when we want to query, the president has immunity. Does that affect the ability to be able to run that industry effectively, to be able to have the quality of petroleum industry we need to have as a country?
Okay. When you're talking management, there's a difference between managing and operations, or managing operations. Many times, okay, I'll give a simple example. This beautiful station, Channels TV, has its management, which resides in Lagos, I believe, and then has those who are responsible for operations and all that. In as much as the coach of a football team can give directions, it is still the responsibility of the players to play the ball. Now, whether the president is the minister or another person is the minister, in reality does not make too much difference. It is the quality of work that is done and the structure that determines. So it's like a coach who decides to be more defensive or another one which decides to be more attacking. In the long run, it doesn't really matter. Now, what we tend to focus more on is the fact that we look for one person. Like I said, it's a messiah complex. One person or one group of people, it may be the president, it may not even be the president, but just want one person to be responsible. Now, when you ask the average Nigerian, what should be the ideal thing? Many people cannot answer. I mean, over a month ago, there was a hue and cry over electricity. And I asked, they said the electricity is expensive. I'm not making a price for any, and I'm not even going there. But my point is, what should be the ideal cost? Nobody can say. You want to be a medical doctor, but you don't know that you need to read about physics. You don't know you need to read chemistry. You don't know you need to read biology, but you just want to be a medical doctor. That's the case with Nigerians. We want cheap fuel. What is the average cost of fuel? Nobody knows. What is the production issue? Nobody knows. What are the parameters that are hindering production? The local things. Nobody knows. But we just want cheap fuel, and we know the person responsible for it is this. That's not the way society functions. A functional society. That is not the way a system functions. A system is made up of component parts. And a system, just like you have your biological systems, you have your reproductive system, you have your respiratory system, you have your digestive system. The mouth has its function, the stomach has its function, the pancreas has its function. The system functions when the component parts start to do their job. We, as a society, need to understand that for this society to work, every component has to do their job. And I think that is the part that is missing in our national dialogue, whether it be in energy, whether it be in every area. The man on the street has a responsibility. His responsibility as a citizen of the nation or a citizen of an OPEC nation is to know certain things, is not to be totally ignorant. The man in NNPC who opens the gate has a responsibility. The man on the field in NNPC has a responsibility. The management of NNPC, they do have their responsibility. The media, the civil society, the associations, everybody has a responsibility. When we take away the responsibility of the component parts, we are actually promoting inadvertently a dysfunctional society. And I think that is the place that we need to look at in terms of results being achieved. Because whether this government achieves or not, in 2027, they may leave, or whatever time they will leave, and we'll still be back to the same questions. Will it not be better for all of us that we will have a functional society that whether they leave or not, we'll be improving as a nation? And the way to do that is for the component parts to function.
Mr. Gilisari, I'd like to return to the matter of crude oil theft, which was one of the promised components in the manifesto. I'd like you to respond to it as well, particularly within the context of whether or not you are seeing the deployment of technological interventions for the monitoring of our pipelines to prevent crude oil theft, and also really can the promise of crude or stopping crude oil theft be delivered without seeing the prosecution of individuals, particularly where we have seen major oil bursts without any form of consequence to those events? Mr. Gilisari, that's for you.
Well, my recommendations are straightforward. One, anybody that commits a crime should be brought to book. Number two, the fact that we have a private security firm that's been helping the government to work is not an aberration. It is rather, progressive, and I think I encourage that. But the result should be equivalent to what it is being, what payments and what services are required. So, for instance, if a security company apprehends a vessel that is laden with stolen crude oil, I really do not see what is the wisdom in burning that vessel or destroying the crude oil. It is a loss to us. It's a further degradation and pollution of our environment, and it doesn't in any way help because it's part of the 200,000 barrels a day that should have been put into the production quota. The other reason that I think that government should pay adequate attention to security, especially using technology, is that they are both very, very much, I don't know what word to use, but they are very critical in combating this menace. Technology in the sense that you can stay from a control center and see what's going on. But the human component that should have boots on the ground to get to where there are infractions is very critical. I don't think that we are lacking that security today. But the fact is, what does it do? And just like Esele said, such technologies and their capacities and capabilities should be made public, so that those who are attempting to make any kind of attempt to steal crude oil further will desist from it. The other thing is, one technology may not fit all. So there is so many different things that we can do. We can use drones, we can use satellite imaging, we can also use, boots on ground, like I said, pipelines that are laid in mangrove forests, thick forests that people cannot go. Of course, those are predominantly attraction for crude oil theft. Those areas, the communities should be part of the process. And I do agree that every Nigerian should be part of the solution. Because if we are not, if we see something we don't tell, if we know something we do not say, we are just ultimately undoing Nigeria. So the security part of it is very critical. Technology is very critical. But more than anything else, the human involvement of the various communities should be considered a top priority.
Let me come to you, Mr. Asele. There's a promise made here, which is what we're trying to speak to, as I've emphasized. Say to achieve full deregulation of the midstream gas prices within 6 months, increase gas production by 20%, and complete critical gas infrastructure project by 2027. Mr. Asele, I would like you to speak to what development you've seen based on this promise.
I think when you talk about deregulation, I don't think they've actually done that. I think what you have is also what I would say partial deregulation. Not completely. The subsidy is still part of the pump price that there's subsidy in it. And that in itself is there. When you talk in terms of gas, you also have those challenges. So what you have now is that I always use the word as there's the economic side of the regulation, and there is the political economic side of the regulation. So it's for the government to find a balance. And the last time I was also here, and I had alluded to the fact that there was still subsidy payment, and there was some deniers. Then later everybody started agreeing that there was subsidy payment still going on. So in terms of deregulation, I don't think they've done that. And then if you still talk about deregulation, you still find that NNPC is still the only one bringing in product. And that is also another challenge that NNPC is facing itself, because it now looks very opaque for us, because NNPC is the one bringing product. NNPC now decide this is how much we are bringing it in, and this is how much we have to sell. So the regulation of the midstream or the downstream, no, has not been done. It has just only been done partially, because what we are paying at the pump station, actually we are paying far less than the price that we are supposed to pay. But that in itself is also to make sure that the social aspect of the society does not collapse. Because if they actually go ahead and say, okay, this is how much we should be paying at the pump price, I think the social dislocation will be enormous. Therefore, I think the government is playing a little bit of politics with that downstream deregulation, which is also understandable. That's why when I hear economics says that take away the pump price, let it be fully deregulated, I always laugh, because at the bottom line, the economics will tell you all things being equal. And we know that in terms of economic, nothing is ever equal. So on that scorecard, I will say rather maybe 40% what they have done in terms of also providing the infrastructure for gas. They are making the right noises, they are saying the right things, but since they gave themselves the timeline of 2027, this is the only one they talked about 6 months. But if I look at it 6 months down the road, yes, they are making all the right noises, but are they there yet? No.
And let's move on to another component of the promised deliverables by the government, which is to accelerate full implementation of the PIA and implement additional favorable policies. I'll come to you, Mr. Showomi, on this one. Are you seeing any activity in that regard? And if indeed you're seeing it, shouldn't we be recording more indigenous local content in the oil and gas sector, particularly in the area of, mining of crude oil, petroleum, and indeed every other area where, the PIA borders on as far as implementation is concerned? Mr. Showomi.
Okay, I think this is one area where there's been significant progress and success within the industry. If you recall, I think about 20 years ago, there weren't really any private companies involved. I mean, one of the success stories for local companies is Seplat, which is today about to buy the assets for ExxonMobil. That would have been unheard of 20 years ago and a number of things. But in terms of the PIA itself, one key component of the PIA states that for the joint venture operations need to be, I think, privatized or something, where they need to be independent entities where they'll be registered. That has not been achieved. But I understand for the news that is filtering in from within the industry is that they are about to achieve something with Indorama. And once that happens, for all the various joint ventures, what that means is that the joint venture operations themselves as an entity will be able to source for funding, and they will be able to, people will be able to interact with them as separate entities. It should be understood very clearly that the PIA is not something that is going to be implemented overnight. It's not like all the other laws. This is an industry that has been operating without an omnibus law for over half a decade, more than 50 years, and now we have a law, and we don't expect everything to fall into line within 2 years or a year. Yes, in ideal circumstances, it should, but there are so many things that are not ideal in those situations. And this is also important to get our ducks in a row before we act, because one of the challenges with the power sector was there was some amount of rush. Yes, it was delayed, but there was rush into the privatization without proper check. And that is what we have also suffered across the years. So do we want to experience the same kind of rush and have similar stop gaps and quick stops in the process? I think that ought not to be. So what we will look at the fundamentals is that as they talked about separate entities the regulator being separated as separate entities, as that happened, yes, we have two regulators for the industry, a dedicated regulator looking at gas, which will be the midstream aspect, and that has enabled a minister to come out. These are significant changes in terms of policy plans, in terms of forward-looking directions. In terms of the effect, you'll be able to see there to be a focus for there to say that every single filling station across the nation should have something to do for gas. I mean, those are progress, whichever way you look at it. Finally, and more importantly, is the fact that the PIA is a law. It is not an action. So laws are like, when you talk about your road, an express, a freeway, an express road, there are those white lines or those dotted lines on the road. They are actually guidelines. It is still the people that are operating that will determine that these guidelines function. Because if you have somebody who considers himself a speed maniac and he does not obey the laws of the road, and he does not drive within the confines of the white lines, and he overtakes when he should not overtake, it will still be dangerous. So laws have limitations to the extent that people and those who are operating around it obey those laws. But equally as important as people operating is the culture. We must have...
My sincere apology. If you can land your thoughts in 10 seconds. We're totally out of time.
So at the end of the day, the culture is equally as important as the people, for people to have a culture that obeys the laws and so that the laws can work.
All right, Mr. Shomu, the whole idea of this is to make government more accountable at the end of the day. For Nigerians, will the fuel be cheaper, the PMS, which is the basic? Will it be cheaper at the end of the day? Will it be more expensive? What should we be looking out for? Which is why we're having all this maybe complicated or complex conversation. At the end, it's about affordability and accessibility. But in rounding off, quick one, we do an assessment of each sector we review. Mr. Shomu, let's start with you since you were the last person to speak. In terms of effort and in terms of results from the petroleum sector, oil and gas sector, how would you assess the government over 100? Effort and results. Mr. Shomu?
Okay, in terms of effort, you probably give them an A, so 75 will will be okay. In terms of results, I think a C will be okay. We give them 55. I mean, those are my own personal views.
All right, Mr. Billy Harris, my apology, we didn't have to take all of the last question from you all the time, but your assessment, efforts and results.
So again, like I said, in terms of efforts...
No, I'm talking to Mr. Gillis, Mr. Gillis Harris. Mr. Gillis Harris.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much. My assessment in the PIA implementation itself, I would say about 60. And then for efforts, we are up to 80% in the efforts we make. But the implementation will be much more where we should be.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean by where we should be. What is that?
What it means is that I'm giving a credit.
Okay, that's 50. Mr. Esele, quick ones. Let's come to you, Mr. Esele. Efforts and results.
BC. Effort B, result C.
Oh, interesting. That appears to be a pass mark for the government in the area of oil and gas, particularly a departure from, assessment of other sectors in the last 1 week. But we'd like to thank you very much, gentlemen, as we, hope that the administration will reflect on your assessment and apply more effort such that more results can be seen in the near future. Mr. Peter Esele is a former president, Trade Union Congress, a former president, Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasan. Thank you so much, sir. We've also had Mr. Olabode Shoumi, Chairman, New Energies and Hydrogen Study Group of NGA, and member group of experts on Gas, UNECE. Thank you so much, Mr. Shomi, who joined us from our Abuja studio. Also, we've had, as a member of our distinguished three-man panel today, Mr. Billy Gillis Harry, the National President, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria, Petroleum, who also joined us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and expert contributions on the program.
Thank you.
And up next, we turn our attention to the politics of Kano State, the historical aspect and the contemporary aspect. What's the implication for the future of Kano State and the stability of that state? Join us for this all-important conversation. After this break, we'll be right back.
The tussle for the Kano throne is not yet over as Muhammadu Sanusi II returned to the Emir's palace in the early hours of Saturday, May 25, just after midnight, in the company of Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State, his deputy, and the Speaker of the State Assembly. After inspecting the palace, the reinstated emir, along with the governor, prayed for a brighter future. The emir spoke to newsmen about his hopes for the state and the nation.
Improve on my previous tenure. We all learn from our mistakes. We all remember what we did well and what we did not do so well. And it is our responsibility to improve on what we did well and to avoid those things that we did not do so well. Life is a continuous learning process. I've enjoyed the break of the 4 years. I've been grateful to God for the time spent. And I thank the people of Kano for their love. I thank them for their affection. I thank all the scholars, the business community, and the political class for the support they've given me.
Meanwhile, the 15th Emir of Kano arrived at Malam Aminu Kano International Airport at about 5 a.m. His followers bowed in respect to the Emir as they joined in prayers for his safe arrival. Tension began when the state government alleged that the National Security Advisor and the APC National Chairman Abdullahi Ganduje were plotting against the reinstatement of Muhammadu Sunusi II as the Emir of Kano.
All of a sudden, it appears some forces from the top are working hard to scuttle the wishes and aspirations of the Kano state people. We are reliably informed that the former governor of Kano State, Abdullahi Umar Ganduje, using the office of the National Security Advisor, is trying everything possible, using that office to bring back the dethroned emir and force him back on the people. This is not going to be acceptable to us, and we as a government will do everything possible to avert it. And we will resist any attempt to enforce anything on us. We will resist any attempt by whosoever.
Aminu Baba, a kingmaker who got the order stopping the reinstatement of Muhammadu Sunusi II, speaks on allegations against the National Security Advisor.
Very, very unfortunate also. I have the Deputy Governor accusing the National Security Advisor that he was the one who gave us the aircraft that brought us to Kano. This is very, very unfortunate. I have a very, very high regards for him, that for him to accuse somebody without facts is very unfortunate.
Despite the police position, Muhammadu Sunusi II appeared with the symbolic royal umbrella which only a current emir is allowed to use. Aminu Ado, on the other hand, appeared before his cheering supporters at the Nasarawa residence of the emir. The Kano Emirate tussle continues to unfold as both Muhammadu Sunusi II and Aminu Ado Bayero claim the throne amidst legal and political uncertainties. Sadiq Ilyasu, Channels Television News.
What's going on in Kano is of concern to every citizen of the country, especially the people of Kano State, because right now we have two people, monarchs laying claim to the throne. Of course, if you followed the news, you would have heard what happened. And that is the conversation for today. And we're being joined on the program by two gentlemen, one joining us from our Kano studio, who is a legal practitioner, Mr. Usman Imam. He joins us from our Kano studio. Also, thank you, Mr. Osman, thank you so much for coming on the program. We also have from our Abuja studio, Mr. Kolawale Johnson, who is a public affairs analyst. Mr. Johnson, thank you as well for coming on the program.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Imam, let's come to you. You are in Kano, so maybe you begin by telling us first and foremost what the pulse of the city is at the moment, given this development. We still saw protests erupting in Garaya yesterday.
Good morning, viewers. I remain Barrister Usman Imam Tudun. So in Kano right now, there is a relative peace. There is not any violence because people understand why the illegal order has been obtained, which does not stop the entire process. So there is no any protest within the ancient city of Kano. Even in Karai, it was politically organized, and the state government is fully aware of those people that have been organizing this violence. And I know with time they are going to be brought to book.
So, for the records, is His Royal Highness Aminu Ado Bayero, is he still occupying the Nasarawa Palace?
Whether he is occupying the Nasarawa Palace or is not is immaterial in the eyes of the law, because you cannot have two emirs at the same time for the same throne, except one is legally recognized and the other one is going to be a pretender. So I can tell you, the one in Nasarawa, the entire world knows that he is a pretender, of course, because he has been removed by the existing law, which is very unavoidable. You cannot stop the governor for signing the law, and you cannot stop the state assembly for drafting or passing the bill, because the bill in no way, there is no contradiction. The bill is in accordance with the culture and the political life of people of Kano State. That is why in the ancient city there is 100% peace. So for that, we can see the state governor has tried and he has demonstrated that he is a man in the control of the game.
All right.
So there is no, we don't have two emirs.
All right.
The only recognized.
If I may button, let's also put in context that we invited Mr. Fage, who was supposed to speak for the other side of the divide, but is not available to speak on the issue. But we have Mr. Kolawole Johnson, who is a public affairs analyst. We've introduced him in our Abuja studio. Mr. Kolawole, let's help us make sense of what you see going on in Kano.
I think the sense should be gotten from what you titled it, the Game of Thrones, and I think that is what it is. And unfortunately, it is turning very political. I take you back to 2020 when Lamido Sanusi was dethroned. Of course, you didn't have protest, but some spoke against that and said it was highly political. And of course, you know that the emir is very outspoken, and I mean, he's one that wouldn't keep quiet if he needs to talk. And some think that was not reserved enough as the leader of the traditional institution, and the political force, of course, took him out. And unfortunately, there is a counter taken. And according to him, Alenti said recently that the move by the Kano state government is only an attempt to address the injustice done to all on him a few years ago. And the Kano state government said this was done through the proposition of the kingmakers of Kano. And remember that the Emirates predates the Nigeria state. And so I think the political forces are trying as much as possible to destroy what is left of our traditional institution. And you also have the courts involved here. Very unfortunate. And I think I read somewhere where lawyers argue that the Federal High Court has no jurisdiction over chieftaincy title, because it actually belongs to the residue, at least, that is completely within the purview of the state government and not the federal government. So you can now ask, who gave, I don't want to address anyone as the post now, who gave the emir, in quotes now, occupying the Nasarawa Palace, the backing to come back to the States? Of course, you know the politics. There is no way the man will come back on his own. Who gave all the enablement, for him to come back, especially when the state government had pronounced, him the the post, the throne. Not just that, of course, it was done through the law. So I think in all of this, we should also expand conversation around the preservation of our traditional institution. You see, take for example the United Kingdom. What they have that has endured for years, of course, it is because people actively, preserve it. Political players do not joke with it. They don't bring it into their politics. So this we are doing would not just, have the effect on Kano. It will grow around the country. Of course, we have complained before that governors, political actors tend to just, make a pawn of our traditional institution. And this is actually going to worsen the case. So for me, making a sense would just mean that the political actors are trying as much as possible, to ensure that the traditional institutions remain a pawn in their hands. And let's say this very carefully. What the former government did was simple. When they took off the soul, Kano is very, what you have in Kano is very similar to what you have in Sokoto, Sakwato, where you only have the Sultan. So Kano also has that respected, institution where the Kano Emirate is the only. But unfortunately, it was divided into 5. And some said it was to ensure that those localities are controlled for political reasons. Now, if that was the case, and the present government, thought differently, and the actors who were in government before are now in Abuja, apparently looking at the science of the politics, that the number is in Kano, that they shouldn't joke with Kano. But unfortunately, they have also failed to look at the politics of the science of politics. Knowing that actors will always want to look at interest. And the interest is this. If you think you should take Kano at all costs because of the actors who are there, who are not necessarily your party members, you've forgotten again that the actors also will have their own selfish interest. When the game, actually begins in earnest, that may actually favor you even more than what you think. So I think politically, they should tread carefully. And again, on moral ground, we also have that obligation to tread carefully so that we don't set the traditional institution, and just throw it into the mud. I think we should be careful.
Interesting. I like your line there, Mr. Kolawole. We should be looking at the science of the politics of the science, something like that. Speaking of the actors behind this, I'll come to you now, Mr. Imam. Even though the former governor of Kano State and leader of the NNPP, Haji Rabiu Kwankwaso, has said that he has nothing to do with what is happening in Kano State as far as the dethronement of Emir Aminu Ado Bayero and the return, the reinstallment of Sanusi Lamido is concerned. Let's go back to 2023 when he had said, he had reportedly said that the opportunity to revisit the Sanusi's dethronement has presented itself and that he would advise the incoming government on what to do as an elder. So can we look at what is happening in Kano State independent of the influence of the former governor and leader of the NNPP, Alhaji Rabiu Kwankwaso? Mr. Imam, that's for you.
Yes, I can say no, because if you look at the situation, Kwankwaso is not in charge physically. Though NPP is for Kwankwaso, and we know Abba is one of the disciples of Kwankwaso. But at this point in time, Abba has done what people of Kano have been agitating during campaign periods. Wherever those days during campaign Abba went, there was issue of reinstatement. There was issue of reunification of Kano Emirate into one single entity, which has been achieved very recently. So whether Kwankwaso is backing it or is not backing it, this is what the majority people of Kano are backing and are praying for. And God, in his infinite mercy, has actualized the dream of Kano people. So, Kwankwaso has said that is going to be a political issue, but now it's a legal issue because there is a law. And if Abba cannot be a reckless governor. If people of Kano State are not with him, he cannot do that. That is why you see there is peace in Kano. Whenever you see there is violence, the violence is organized by few people that the government knows them. And I know with time those people are going to be brought before the law. Yes. So actually for me and for people of Kano State, this is the right thing. Yes, for the one United Emirate, which we have cherished from our history, before plannings, down from, what do you call it, from the lens of memory, if you can go back to Rumpa, or we can say Hausa Kingdom, we have one single Kano Emirate. So
will you also say, pardon me if I may come in there, will you also view independently that court order stopping the reinstallment of Mohammed Sanusi II, independent of any influence of the former governor, Abdullahi Ganduje?
That order actually has been, if any reasonable person can look at it, is politically influenced.
Oh, so you agree that that is politically influenced?
Judge who signed on the order, it has been found out that he is not in Kano. He has been in United States of America. Look at where we are going. And the court order has not been served on the state government. That is why the governor went ahead and completed the entire programs. So you see, Ganduje, he may have influenced the order because people in Kano have known his political approaches. So he can do, and he can, whatever allegation that may be attached to Ganduje may be possible, may be right. Yes, because we have seen his administration in Kano, how things were going wrong and how things were influenced indirectly by him. So actually we know that court order is illegally obtained. That is why it does not have any legal force. As I said the order time.
Mr. Ma, if I may butt in,
should not be enforceable.
All right, interesting.
But unfortunately, some few days the order was people were trying to enforce, or the security agencies were trying to enforce the order, which the order can, even if it has been enforced, does not have any legal consequence to the entire programs, because the programs, right from the appointment.
If I may butt in, Mr. Imam, because of time. Mr. Imam, my apologies if I may butt in. Let's take the conversation to Mr. Kolawole. Mr. Kolawole, there's a concern you raise, I think, which is the concern of every discerning individual, the interference. How do we insulate traditional institutions from political interference? We saw this under Bakarimi, when the Emirates were divided into four, and he said he's going to sleep soundly, that His Royal Highness late Nadu Bayero, there's nothing special. He made very strong statement I can't repeat on television. And then 40 years after, we saw what happened with Abdullahi Ganduje, falling out with the Emir, and then even went on at public fora to say he served him a Jonathan medicine. And then this has now happened that NNPC took over and they've reversed that. People are even speculating whether after 8 years of NNPC, if another government comes in, whether Sanusi will not be... It's just something that should not be a conversation. How do we insulate the traditional institution from political interference if this is the case?
Of course, I mean, we don't have any alternative to the laws. We need to use the instrument of the law. But unfortunately, those who will make the law are themselves political actors. Would they make laws against themselves? Now, you were asking the other guest about the court issues. I said something that, and you asked if there were political interference. Of course, he agreed. He was agreeing with that there was no way that order would have come without some interference. The truth is, both camps are playing politics, whether the camp of Ganduje or the camp of Kwekwanso. I was talking about numbers, and I talked about the politics behind the science. I was only referring to the figure. You know, I mean, the man you mentioned, of course, he will have interest. So clearly, they are all playing politics. However, if we must insulate the traditional institution from all of this, it must be by the law. There is no other thing. We don't have any alternative. We don't have that mature, social culture. We don't have that much, that maturity in our dealings enough for people, to exercise that restraint, when things are not in their favor. So we can only do this via the law. So if we are serious about preserving our traditional institution, this must be done by the law. But don't also forget that you now have the council, the local government. And so, I mean, we need to create the balance anyway. But I think we should try as much as we can to, whether tacitly or directly, I mean, we must be able to ensure that we protect our traditional institution. And see, what you have on ground is going to test not just the democratic ideals of the president, his creed, his credentials, should be brought to this, for him to ensure that this does not degenerate into crisis. Unfortunately, if this continues, protest on both sides, we may be having something dangerous on our hand. If you have something erupting in Kano, you have something erupting in Rivers, I don't think it's in his favor. So we should also look at this dimension to it.
I'll come to you now, Mr. Imam, with a view to asking you to respond to the same question, how to insulate the traditional institutions from political interference. But I'd like to put it in proper context because it's been said that it's the Sanusi and the Bayero family are one and the same, that in fact the fathers of both men are sons of late Abdullahi, I believe Bayero himself. So it's just a difference in name. And in fact, the emir that has been reinstalled is married to the sister of the deposed emir, Aminu Ado Bayero. So it's what's happening here now looks like, a particular family, the royal family, being pitted against each other because of political interference. Are you concerned about this unwholesome implication as a result of political disagreements, and the royal family being a pawn in the play of these politicians? Are you concerned about that? And how can we check that in the future?
You see, as the order, I guess, has said, it is only by the law. But unfortunately, the other time I said it here, that in Nigeria we have our constitution, which is a Republican constitution. And in that, there are implications. Because if you are going to say, okay, let us protect traditional institutions, let us have laws for them. So most of the laws that are being enacted have contradicted the spirit of the constitution. That is the problem. So I think we can only, let's say, have something law, but there are two theories like in America. I don't want to go into that, where you have royalist theory, where you have liberalist theory. Under royalist theory, what the royalist theory is saying, the issue of hereditary right. So, and the issue of hereditary right cannot exist under our present constitutional context. It's only the liberal. And the liberal theory cannot favor the traditional rulers because it's saying, okay, we can have a written law for traditional institution, but the requirements for one to be appointed as an emir or as an oba or whosoever must be neutralized. That the issue of hereditary right cannot be considered. It's the issue of required qualities that are needed at that particular time. This is the liberal theory that can be that you can bring the institution under the written law because of our constitution. But if you look at the royalist theory, royalist theory can only exist where you have monarchical constitutions. And most of the countries that have operated monarchical systems, you see constitutions that are Arab in nature or countries that their constitution is not written like UK. You see, we have what we call ceremonial monarch in UK, but the constitution is unwritten. So there is actually, we need to look at it academically before we put something. Yes, because there is a deep jurisprudence, but unfortunately, our legislators are not there. Yes, like what I have heard, the speaker has been trying to see how they are going to be given the constitutional roles, which I know surely is going to contradict the spirit of the Constitution. And the spirit of our Constitution does not emanate from the Constitution. It emanates from other constitutions. So you see, even the law that has been signed in Kano recently, we are going to look at it again, whether there is that contradiction. Right. If there is that contradiction, definitely we are going to advise them to amend it for better existence so that there is no contradiction in the law.
All right, let me come to Mr. Kolawole.
On the safer side, but I hope there is not such contradiction.
As we begin to wind down,
discrimination, you know, all over the world is not accepted.
All right, so as we begin to wind down, let's come to Mr. Kolawole. Going forward, at what point? I know you'd mentioned it in passing, but I'm thinking about what happened in Rivers State. As at the time the president stepped in, what the president did caused almost more trouble than resolving the issue, and we're still in that spiral till today. Maybe till tomorrow, if care is not taken. At what point should the president step in? Because people are saying it's only when there is a threat to break down law and order. Should we wait for a breakdown of law on the way? We're seeing telltale signs. If the government can't contain this, if it emanates beyond this, because what is happening is what is called an uneasy camp.
Well, I mean, knowing well that the president gets security report daily, I don't think he's unaware of what is going on in Kano. And if there is any official of his government giving tactical support to Adobayero, I don't think the president will be completely unaware. If he wasn't aware, he must have called for a briefing on that by now, of course. This has lingered for some days. So I don't want to believe completely that he's not aware at all. But now, on the other hand, if he's aware, what do you think will be his position? He's a politician. Now, you made reference to Rivers. I think it was the mode, it was the approach, it was the strategy that the president employed that appeared to be the issue. We were told that the actors were not called to the table to resolve and for both parties to have, like a common ground. But the president only handed a resolution to them to go implement. And you ask, who drafted those resolutions? Who were those? I mean, you can't know a matter more than the people. I mean, more than the actors there. It will certainly favor those who belong to the president. Now, let's look at that vis-a-vis the Kano issue. If the president is going to support politically, I think he will only go for his own. But as a statement that he is asked it, of course, he knows that he should be putting his credentials to test there. Like I said, his ideals, his principles, what he represents, and find a lasting solution to this without looking at the big numbers in Kano, knowing well that there are several ways to kill a bird when the time comes. Right. So for me, I think the president cannot, of course, this should not be the area of I was not aware.
All right.
No, this shouldn't be. So I think the president is fully aware of what is going on. He may be looking at the best approach, or the best way to intervene. But I think he's aware.
Yeah, you can land on your thought there in just about 5 seconds.
Yeah, of course, I have already.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time on the program. It will be indeed be interesting to see how this will be resolved. We'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Usman Imam, a legal practitioner who joined us from our Kano studio, and also Mr. Kolawole, who joined us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, sirs, for your time on the program. And here are some of your thoughts to the conversation. We'll take just about two. This one is from Lawrence Osifo, who chooses to speak to the Kano issue. And he says, I hope this political and traditional tussle in Kano doesn't degenerate into something else in the future. The traditional institution is a sacred one. Why play unnecessary politics by governors? Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. All right, this is from Professor Enakame. The federal government must take charge of the illegal mining in Nigeria that's fueling insecurity. Aside oil, government must look at attracting genuine investor on the gas sector. He said a lot of things as far as it's concerned. We don't have so much time, but those are your thoughts. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. And, of course, your usual company. We'll be back again tomorrow for yet another episode of the program. I'm Jeffrey Uzanga. And I'm Bukola Koka. See you tomorrow.